Hi, I'm Sam. I'm an artist from Dallas, Texas, and like many people this past year, I discovered tufting. But instead of making a rug today, I'm going to show you how I made a pillow. Tufting has become something I really enjoy, and while I do make rugs, I actually prefer to make them to be hung on the wall, like this, and this, and this. A couple weeks ago, I was invited to do an art show, and I made this piece for the show. It was a really cool combination of cut pile and loop pile, as well as some latch hooking, and I was super proud of the show. So a couple days before the opening, I dropped off my work, and it got hung above this gray couch. Yes, a couch. The interesting thing about this venue is it's actually a really fancy showroom for like upscale furniture, which is cool because it gives your viewer and your customer a chance to see how the artwork is gonna look in their house. So, looking at my work hung over this gray couch, I really wanted to make something to sort of tie everything together and make it even better. So I asked myself, what can I do? Oh, I'll make a pillow. To make these pillows, I need the usual supplies that I would use for tufting. Yarn, backing material, tufting gun, and also a few more items. Fabric, thread, sewing machine, and interfacing, which we'll get to. Since these are just tufted pieces, they start the exact same way any project, rug, or wall rug would begin. You know, do your design, prep your frame, tuft away. So that's what I did. All of my designs start as a sketch in Procreate where I can play with color, layout, and in this case, decide which parts of the piece I want to be cut pile and which parts I want to be loop. And then it is on to projecting onto my frame and tufting as usual. Now's the time for the experimenting, because to be honest, I don't know if this is gonna work. Usually after you're done tufting, your next step is to glue, and that is where the process for this project is gonna deviate a little bit. Normally, yes, I would use a heavy-duty rug glue or at least some PVA glue to secure the backing, but because these are pillows and I want them to be flexible, I want to be able to throw them in the wash if they get dirty, I can't use glue in this case. Also, it is the morning of the show and I don't have time to wait for glue to dry. So, here's where interfacing comes in. Interfacing is a type of thin backing that is used to stiffen or add body to a fabric and comes in two types, sew-in and fusible. Since I want this to replace the rug glue that I would normally use to secure the back of my tufted piece, I am going to use fusible interfacing, specifically a double-sided fusible interfacing. Now, fusible interfacing has a resin coating on the back that bonds with the fabric when heat and steam and pressure are applied. You iron it. Yeah, you just iron it. Using this, I make an interface sandwich between the back of my tufted piece, piece of interfacing, and then another piece of fabric, so that way I have a clean finish at the end. You don't get to see any of those lines from the back of the yarn being tufted in, and everything looks perfect at the end. I just propped like a 2-inch thick board underneath so that I'd have a surface to press into and not stretch it out too much. And then just using a t-shirt that I dampened with a spray bottle of water, I ironed all of the pieces together. This is after it's been ironed. It flattens the fibers quite a bit, but I think with a good vacuum, it will liven them back up and then they'll be fine. I'm not super like worried about that. The next test, however, is to wash it. Gasp! Yeah, I'm gonna wash this. So as you can see, this is where the Wonder Under was. And it's like really created like a seam. Okay. How are we doing in here, guys? Okay. It looks... I mean, off top, it looks good. Isolate the fiber. You know how in a sandwich, you'll go to take a bite and your toppings will just slide out just everywhere. Just tomato here, lettuce here, just everywhere. I think that's what happened here. I normally tuft with 2 strands of yarn in my tufting gun. It makes for a much fuller finish. You don't have to do quite so many lines. But occasionally, you know, you still end up really packing it in a certain area. And I think that's what happened here in these spots where I tufted a bit too heavily. It was yarn on top of yarn on top of yarn, and not all the pieces got to bond to that interfacing, which led to me being able to, you know, pull out a strand here and there. Not ideal, not enough for me to call this a fail. It still looked great. It was a win in my book. I kept going. I chose to make what's called an envelope pillowcase. It is the kind that has just a slit in the back to tuck an inner pillow into versus, you know, trying to put a zipper into pillows. At this point, it was a couple hours before the show, and I just did not have the time nor the skill to be trying to put zippers in pillows. So once I get all those pieces prepped, I put everything together, and it was not without its own issues. We ran into some problems, okay? Yeah, just problems. I'm nervous. Why do I feel like I'm doing this wrong somehow? Mistake number 1 was not paying attention to what side my pieces of fabric were on. See, right here, you can see my tufted piece. It was on the bottom, on the outside. But when you're making something like this, you put it together inside out, which means my tufted piece should have been facing inwards while I was sewing, so that way when I was done and flipped everything inside out to the correct side, you would have actually gotten to see it instead of the backing fabric. So I had to spend way more time than I wanted ripping those seams out and then sewing everything back together again, because of course, I didn't realize I did this until I was on the last side. And then I turned around and did this. What are we doing, guys? How did this happen? Really? In the final stretch? You chewy little bitch. Another time-consuming rookie mistake. I forgot to put the foot back down when I turned one of those corners. Which, if you've ever sewn anything or operated a sewing machine, if you don't put that foot down, it holds all of your pieces of fabric together and lets it stitch it properly. Well, when you don't put the foot down, you get just a tangle of mangled threads at the bottom and a loose seam that can fall apart at any time, and it jammed up my machine. So I had to fix that too. Rude. By this time, it was about an hour before the show, and I realized I was in that part of a project where you're almost done, the deadline is closing in, and you just start rushing. Just rushing for no reason, just trying to get things done and making mistakes that I normally wouldn't make and costing myself time that I did not have. So I took a break. I took a shower, I picked out my clothes for the show. I ate the lunch that I had meant to eat hours before and forgot because I was working on this self-imposed last-minute project, but it was worth it in the end. After that time to reset, I was able to finish all my sewing with no more mistakes. I got them stuffed with these lovely 18-inch plush pillow inserts from Crate & Barrel and cleaned up the pile and, you know, did a nice little lint roll over everything, and I'm so happy with how they turned out.
Hey, what we learned?
1, fusible interfacing, really helpful. I think next time I try this, I might try combining the interfacing with like a washable fabric glue, since I'll have more time hopefully, and see if that helps in those areas where the yarn got overpacked. And I think that might even work if I tried to make like patches, so maybe we'll see if that works. A walking foot was really helpful in this project because of how good it works when you're sewing thick fabrics. It wouldn't have been impossible, but it would have been a lot more difficult considering the layers of fabric, of backing cloth, of yarn, of interfacing that went into this. Having that walking foot kept everything together and made sure nothing slid out of place, so I was able to get those tight, clean seams. 3, and most important, take your time. Despite how much I loved the end result of this project, next time I make these, I will definitely give myself the space and time and grace to actually enjoy the process instead of just rushing through like a mad woman. So there you have it. Can you tuft a pillow? Yes. Yes, you can. Absolutely, 100% tuft a pillow. Just maybe give yourself more time than I did. You know, just a thought. Throwing that out there. It makes things a lot easier when you're not in a rush. Despite the rush, I really enjoyed making these. I love, love, love how they turned out. The store owners loved them as well, and they were a hit at the show. What more can you ask for? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel for more art and creative content. Comment down below, what projects are you working on? What are you making these days? Whatever it is, just remember, you don't have to make it perfect. You just have to make progress. I'm Sam. I made that. You should make something too.
Sam made that.
Thick boy right there. All right, we got a straight stitch. We don't need that much. Foot down. All right now, walking foot. All right now, walking foot.